It was a bitterly cold night in Moscow, Idaho, November 13th, 2022. Just another quiet evening in this small college town, home to the University of Idaho. But by sunrise, the town would be forever scarred. For young students, full of life, ambition, and dreams, had been brutally murdered in their own home. The news sent shockwaves, not just across the state, but throughout the entire country. This is the chilling story of Madison Mogen, 21, Kaylee Goncalves, 21, Xana Kernodle, 20, and Ethan Chapin, 20, and the man who would ultimately confess to ending their lives in one of the most horrific crimes in recent American history. Bryan Kohberger. At first glance, it seemed impossible. These were good kids. Madison and Kaylee were best friends, inseparable since grade school. Xana was bubbly and filled every room with her energy. Ethan, the only male victim, was known for his infectious smile and kind heart. He was a triplet, one of 3 siblings, attending the University of Idaho. They lived in an off-campus house at 1122 King Road, a cozy 3-story building where the young adults tried to enjoy the best years of their lives. But that house would soon become a crime scene more grisly than most detectives had ever seen. The timeline of this nightmare begins months before that November night. In August 2022, investigators would later discover a cell phone pinged near the King Road house multiple times. It belonged to Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old criminology PhD student at nearby Washington State University. He wasn't just some random passerby. According to authorities, his phone had been in the area at least 12 times before the murders, and most of those visits in the late hours of the night. In October, Kohberger took things further. He allegedly messaged one of the victims through Instagram. She didn't respond, so he sent more messages, just short greetings. "Hey, how are you?" Repeated again and again. Harmless on the surface, but chilling in context. Bryan Kohberger was obsessed. And on the night of November 13th, 2022, that obsession turned deadly. According to the coroner and subsequent investigations, the murders occurred between 4 o'clock and 4:25 a.m. All 4 students were asleep in their bedrooms. Some showed signs of fighting back, but the killer moved swiftly, brutally. A large knife was used, not a pocket knife, but something far more deadly. One roommate would later recall hearing muffled cries, a man's voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She didn't realize what had happened. She locked herself in a room, terrified. When the bodies were discovered, the community was devastated. Police found Madison and Kaylee in the same bed. Xana and Ethan were in another room. The crime scene was covered in blood. There was no sign of forced entry. Panic and confusion spread across campus. For over a month, there were no leads, no arrests. Students left campus early. Parents pulled their children out of school. The killer was still out there, but behind the scenes, law enforcement was building their case. They collected DNA from a knife sheath left behind on Madison and Kaylee's bed. That DNA didn't match any in national databases. So they took trash from Kohberger's parents' house in Pennsylvania and compared it. It was a match. Bryan Kohberger was arrested on December 30th, 2022. The country breathed a sigh of relief, but the story was far from over. As investigators peeled back the layers, they found more disturbing details. Kohberger followed 3 of the victims on Instagram. He had visited the Mad Greek restaurant where 2 of them worked, and while being extradited to Idaho, he allegedly muttered to himself, trying to stay calm, "I'm fine. This is okay." he repeated. Police later seized items from his apartment: black gloves, stained mattress covers, a computer tower, receipts, even a Fire TV stick. Every detail painted a clearer picture. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment attack. This was planned, calculated, cold. The search warrant executed on his apartment also revealed possible hair strands, a dark, red-stained item, and an animal hair, potentially linking him to Kaylee's dog, Murphy, who was found unharmed at the scene. But the biggest shock came on July 2nd, 2025. Kohberger, once insistent on his innocence, pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. In doing so, he avoided the death penalty, but agreed to spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. The families of the victims, though heartbroken, finally had some closure. The court proceedings were long and painful. During the trial, survivors testified. Text messages were revealed. The roommates had discussed going back out that night. One even unknowingly saw Xana's lifeless body, but thought she was drunk. She locked herself in a room, trying to process what she'd seen. The affidavit detailed how Kohberger returned to the scene the next morning. His vehicle, a white Hyundai Elantra, was spotted speeding away around 4:20 a.m. By 9:20 a.m., his cell phone pinged near the crime scene again. Investigators learned that Kohberger's car had been caught on surveillance multiple times near the crime scene in the weeks before the murders. His movements were methodical. He turned his phone off during the window of the crime, but not before and not after. This level of detail and behavior baffled investigators. How could someone studying criminal behavior, with access to legal theory and forensic science, make such a devastating series of mistakes? Still, questions remain. What drove him to kill? Did he know the victims personally? Was this an experiment in manipulation for a criminology student gone dark? His plea deal meant many of those questions may never be answered. And maybe they shouldn't be. Because for the families of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, the only truth that matters is this: their children were taken too soon, too violently. At the University of Idaho, a memorial garden now stands in their honor. Students leave flowers. Strangers light candles. A community that was shattered is slowly healing. But their story isn't over. Because through every news report, every shared memory, every person who says their names, Madison, Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, their lives echo on. We must remember, not just how they died, but how they lived. Kaylee Goncalves was fiercely loyal, with a laugh that filled every room. She was a senior, planning to move to Austin with Madison. Madison Mogen had dreams of working in marketing, loved concerts, and shared everything with Kaylee. Xana Kernodle was spontaneous and vibrant, working at a local restaurant while studying hard. Ethan Chapin, kind and steady, was a triplet who brought joy to every family photo and loved sports. Their futures were stolen, but their stories remain. As for Bryan Kohberger, he now sits behind bars, sentenced to 4 life terms and an additional 10 years. His name will fade into the shadows of the justice system. But the names of those 4 students, they'll never be forgotten. In the days after the murders, vigils were held across the country. Thousands of candles lit the dark. Posters with the students' smiling faces appeared in every corner of the nation. Universities held moments of silence. Even those who never met the victims felt their loss. News media dissected every detail of the case. Social media exploded with theories, many of them inaccurate. The spotlight on Kohberger grew, not out of fascination, but out of collective disbelief. How could someone with no criminal record, who studied crime and justice, commit such an atrocity? Experts weighed in. Some suggested Kohberger fit the psychological profile of a narcissistic loner. Others pointed to his obsession with control. One disturbing detail emerged. He had posted academic surveys asking criminals to describe their emotions and motives. It now appears he may have been researching for his own crime. This chilling overlap between academic interest and real-world violence horrified even seasoned psychologists. Was this a case of theory bleeding into reality? Or had Kohberger always intended to carry out such a crime? His professors and classmates later admitted that while he was quiet, nothing suggested the monster lurking beneath. And perhaps that's the most frightening part, how normal he appeared. The investigation, now taught in law enforcement training, is considered a landmark in modern policing. The combination of digital tracking, forensic DNA matching through genealogical research, and careful surveillance created an airtight case. This wasn't just a crime. It was a test of law enforcement's ability to outmatch a suspect who knew the playbook. Let it be a reminder to look out for each other, to cherish life, and to never forget the victims whose light was extinguished far too soon. Because behind the headlines, behind the courtroom drama and forensic science, there were 4 young people full of dreams who deserved so much more. Madison, Kaylee, Xana, Ethan, may their memories live on, always.